and welcome to Off the Beaten Tracks, the only show that's sweeter than a honeybee's ass and only half the calories.
Again, and welcome to Off the Beaten Tracks. Today we're talking to one of the most original vocalists of the 80s, Bill Wood. He was in the band I, which, if you recall your 80s cult information, had a huge hit with a song called Out on a Limb. Bill's here today just before heading off to the Transact to play with his current group, the duo, right?
Yeah,
Bill
this
Wood
is a duo gig.
Right.
Today.
But I'm happy to have you here to talk about all the fun we had with I back in the day.
Hi, Roxanne. Nice to be here.
So, as I understand it, we were chatting a little earlier about how you came to be the vocalist for I. Because apparently, when I won the Q107 Homegrown, they actually had another vocalist at that time.
They did. I actually remember before they even submitted the tracks to the contest, Andy and myself, we had played for years in a band called the Onos, sort of a power punk thing that eventually crashed and burned, and we never did get to put out a record. We were on the first Q107 Homegrown record, and that's what gave us our initial sort of launch. And when that fizzled, I didn't hear from Andy for a while, and then we got together for some drinks, and he came over and he brought a tape of his current recording project, as well as a photo of the singer. And he says, this is what I've got happening. So there were a lot of good songs on the tape. There was the single, the Hollywood Girls thing, but there were also a couple of nice sort of moodier, Michael Bell had that kind of Brian Ferry, matinee idol look, and a really great voice. And so I was excited for him. And they submitted to the Q107 Homegrown contest. They won hands down, and things were going really well. I was still a friend with Andy. I had a different band. We were called Billy Club. And just because we were buddies, Andy introduced me to the guy that was managing I at the time, a guy named Evan Edelman, who was amazing. I kind of wish we had stuck with him. But so he took on Billy Club as well as I. So he was putting together gigs, and we were the opening act for I. So I got a chance to kind of watch the development of I while I was also fronting my own band. And I think, not sort of to, stir up the pot or anything like that. I think it was starting to become very clear that there was friction between Andy and Michael. And I was kind of just watching it, just picking it up, and then I just happened to be, I was called in for a meeting, and I was sitting outside Evan's office, and I with Michael Bell were in having a discussion, and it was quite a heated thing, and it sounded to me like, I think this guy is literally shooting himself in the foot. And they sort of all filed out in a bad mood, and then when Andy went by, he kind of looked at me and says, we got to talk. And I just said, the answer is yes. I had a lot of people that, thought I was a bit of a traitor, as well as some of the guys in the Billy Club band. You have to understand, Billy Club, we were, our own local version of Guns N' Roses. I mean, we had 2 drug dealers in the band. I was like out of my head most of the time. We were like a rolling sort of party, and but it was not good for my health. I didn't have the record deal at the time. When I joined them, they were still hunting for a record deal, and but we were playing good gigs. Like this Evan Edelman guy was a real hustler. So we were, even without a record deal, we opened up for BTO at Kingswood Theatre there at Canada's Wonderland. And we did a couple of other really pretty high-profile shows for a band. And then he was the one that got us onto the CBC Rockmores thing, which was totally the game changer for us. Like, it just was, it sort of put us on a stage that I think was more conducive to what we were trying to present.
Nowadays, when people go on these talent shows, the Voice and talent shows and stuff, they basically have to sign contracts that tie them up in knots for decades.
We signed some kind of, something, I mean, CBC probably owns the footage to that. I don't know. I just got a copy on a hard drive of the first episode. It's, that's like, I think I'll just keep that to myself.
Oh my God.
Lots of Tom Jones hip gyrations and all the rest of it,
So you were signed to
Duke Street Records.
To Duke Street.
Yeah, I mean, we were trying for the majors and all that kind of stuff. You have to understand, by the time we signed our record deal, we were pushing 30, and so we had been trying to get signed since we were late teens, and after high school for me, it was the progressive rock kind of thing, and I had an amazing band. Our keyboard player went on to win Academy Awards for his movie soundtracks, a guy named Michael Dana, but he went to our high school, and so we had this progressive rock band with a Mellotron. Then all of a sudden, the Sex Pistols showed up on whatever, Rolling Stone magazine or something, and it was just like, whoa. And I picked up like that first Elvis Costello record, and it was just like, it was like, wow, because it was like, I'd always been sort of guitar player, singer guy, but then when the progressive rock stuff came, my chops just weren't up to it. I wrote a handful of tunes, and I laugh when I listened to them. It was like, oh yeah, there's me trying to be Talking Heads. Oh, there's me being Elvis Costello. So I was, being influenced by, but it was very exciting. We laid down these songs, and then I promptly went off to Acadia University. I was doing good. I took business administration. I was offered a job to stay and work for a law firm. I'm literally like 3 weeks or a month away from final exams at the end of the season, and I'm getting phone calls like, your song's winning the Q107 homegrown contest. I'm like, what are you talking about? So anyway, it turned out my buddy that had got me the studio time just thought he would quietly send it into the contest and see what happens, and we just were blown every way. And the song was kind of an Elvis Costello-y tune called Not Gonna Cry, and it still kind of holds up. It wasn't a bad song. So I had a band waiting for me, and was home for a week. I had sent them songs, just me on acoustic guitar, of the tunes that I had written while I was away, and we had 5 days, and we did a show at the Alma Combo, and it was lined up down the street. Like, all of Burlington came out, as well as a whole bunch of curious people from the city, like the Q107 listeners and stuff. I mean, it was unbelievable. Right away, Bomb Records that had put out a lot of, I think they did the Battered Wives, they had a record deal for us. I mean, it was just... It was just crazy cuckoo, and so we hooked up with a guy based out of Hamilton, and did the Hamilton bar scene all summer long. It was packed everywhere we went. We were doing 6-nighters, so we're playing 3 sets a night, 6 nights a week, high energy, physical, power, punk, pop, and it absolutely took its toll.
So you were signed to Duke. Now, Duke owned their own recording studio, did they not?
That's right. They owned Manta Sound. And
did that mean that it was sort of a given that you could have as much time as you wanted for basically no cost?
No, what was a given was that we were going to record at the studio, but they were charging us, on paper, full corporate rates, which were basically double what most musicians would go into. So, and then they would get half of it back, which so basically, they were able to put us in their studio and pay themselves. The drag of all of that was these inflated budgets were on our recoupable account, kind of thing. So we did 2 albums and 4 videos with Duke Street. By the time they let us go, our recoupable account for 2 records and 4 videos was, I think it was $460,000. So So we were kind of relieved in a sense when it all, because there's just no way we were ever going to be able to make that back and actually see any, But on the other hand, we got signed. Our music got out there. Radio was very accepting of there were some distribution hiccups that kind of might have caused problems. You never know, and hindsight, 2020 and all the rest of it. But I have no resentments about anything that happened. And, at the end of the day, if your stuff is on the radio and people are hearing it, if it's there in the stores, it's up to the kids to buy the records.
So were you a little bit jaded with the success of II after having had the success of the previous bands that you've been? Or was this something on a different level?
I wasn't jaded because I had just sort of had a kind of a little bit of a rebirth in a sense. I was a new dad. It's like, holding your child for the first time is a very incredible experience, as well as being newly sober. So everything kind of had even a sparkle around it. It was just, my eyes were wide open, and I was able to take it all in. And it was a magical time because, our fan base were, teeny boppers, right? So they weren't, there was no, I was a married guy by then. So there was no, temptation. These girls were too young for all of that. And they were all somebody's daughters, because that's how I was seeing things. So then it was like a case of like unbelievable fan mail and bags of stuffed teddy bears and all of this kind of stuff. And it was very, it was really lovely. Like, these kids were still innocent. We had Terry Brown produce the first record. He was, kind of legendary with the work that he had done with Rush, and we were intimidated, but he was just actually the perfect fit for what we were trying to do, because we were looking for a kind of a bit more of a mature, softer sound. We didn't want it to be too, we were happy with the momentum that the song Hollywood Girls had given us, but we had already shifted in our sound, and we're moving away from just sort of the really blatant kind of bubblegummy poppy approach. And those sessions were incredible. That whole first record, all of that, everything about it, is a really great memory. We landed all of these great tours, Glass Tiger, Platinum Blonde. We did shows with Honeymoon Suite, Gowan, Images in Vogue. It was great.
When you were recording this album, I noticed there's only 4 members of the band that are given, the face treatment.
You're wondering where that wall of sound comes from.
I'm wondering where that comes from, and I'm wondering
smoke and mirrors.
Who was playing the keyboards, because there's not.
I'll tell you the story about that. When II were playing, and I was singing in Billy Club, opening for them, they had this keyboard player. His name was David Shaw, fresh from England. He had won the Young Jazz Musician Award there. He was playing on some cruise ships. He fell in love with a Canadian girl who was on holiday, and he ended up in II, and he was the most phenomenal keyboard player, as well as he was gorgeous. He looked like Simon Le Bon. He had blonde hair, and he was a big part of the sound of II. And anyway, and then I joined the band, and then he quit. We brought in, I think, Michael Dana, the Academy Award winner, came in and did tracks for us, and David Shaw did tracks, and I believe, I had a hard time reading the credits, Paul Inston, a friend from Burlington who's gone on to do a lot of things and has won awards. So we had 3 different, we replaced Dave in the studio with 3 keyboard players. So we had one guy doing kind of percussion sequencing. We had Mike Dana come in, and he did the you know, the sort of that big sound in Out on a Limb, that's him, you know. I mean, that's what he did in our progressive rock bands and stuff like that. And then so we needed to find somebody for the live show. So we had another buddy that came on board, and you know, I definitely think, you know, we did not sound live like this record, you know, and it was a bit of a concern.
Several people have said to me that the distinctive thing about the song Out on a Limb, and this may have to do with your personal status at the time that you recorded it, it had a tentativeness that sort of appealed to so many of us who really were out on that limb at that time, wondering what was next, wondering where we were going with our lives. And the sound in your voice seemed to encapsulate that feeling.
Yeah, you know, I mean, the reality is the vocal damage that I did to myself with the Onos. I kind of continued on with it in Billy Club, just with sort of hard living and what have you. And so I really did not have 100% of my voice back when, especially for this first record. And so I was singing softer just as a way of resting things, and in a hope that the resting would open it up and I would get some of those higher notes that I thought I had lost forever. They did come back, you know, kind of thing. So, I mean, I kind of kept that to myself. I was going to a throat doctor the whole time I was in the Onos, and he had this chart, you know, and so basically for 2 years I sang with a form of laryngitis. I don't really remember too much of the actual vocal sessions. I do, however, remember coming in for the first time in the studio, cranking it up and listening to Out on a Limb for the first time with Terry's production and our friends' input, and just the way that song just had come together. You know, it felt very exciting, and you know, it was thrilling, you know.
And what about the first time you heard it in the air?
I'm sure I must have heard it here in the GTA at some point, but what I do remember mostly was when our first East Coast tour. I'm trying to think who we were with. It was probably, I think it was Glass Tiger, and it just was on the radio so we're just driving to all these different towns, and just, you know, every half an hour they're playing Out on a Limb. That was thrilling.
Who decides what becomes the single for the album? Who was the person who decided, okay, Out on a Limb, that's the one we're going with?
Andy and I had a songwriting session, and this Out on a Limb tune popped out, and it's, for some reason, it just felt special. Like, we knew it wasn't a driving rock hit or whatever, but it just had something to it. And I remember we brought it in to Duke Street, and everybody just went, oh my gosh, okay, we've got the record, here we go. So, and then I think really it was probably a case of some strong contenders, and once the record's done, you know, you get a chance to really listen, because sometimes things lose whatever in translation. I kind of feel like we had demoed a version of Rick's song Fall to Pieces, which was fantastic, and then somehow the next version, which was the one that ended up on the record, had lost a little something. I think it was a tempo shift or whatever, but it was still a strong contender. It was a nice feeling that the record company were excited about the song as we were, so that, you know, it was great. That's going to be the first single. X-Ray is going to be the second. We were hoping to get to the third one, which was going to be Rick's tune, but that's another story.
Okay, last little question. What is this?
Yes. Teldec technology. Direct metal mastering. Teldec quality. What the hell's Teldec? I have no idea. All I know is whatever was happening in the recording world, because there were no CDs yet, this was, I think, the, you know, maybe one of those steps as they moved towards digital something or other. So it was direct metal mastering. I have no idea. All I know is we were incredibly cutting edge at the time to have that on our record. If anybody knows, feel free to, in the comments, explain to us what that is.
Well, thanks for coming in today,
You're
Bill.
welcome. You're
It's been
absolutely welcome.
wonderful talking to you about this album. We're going to talk to you as well about the second album. But right now it's time to say thanks for dropping by to Off the Beaten Tracks. We have been talking today to Bill Wood from II.
The journey of 1,000 miles starts with just one step. But after that, your feet start to get really tired.